Sir, I didn't mean to make a mistake.
I can't deal with the excesses. You're fired! Oh my God!
I just got fired. I don't know what to do. I feel so lost.
The dining room was full. Every table occupied. Every glass polished. Every light angled to make wealth look effortless. And in the middle of all of it, a woman stood very still while a man destroyed her name. She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She just stood there, holding a tray of crystal glasses, while the manager announced, loud enough for every silk dress and tailored suit in the room to hear, "You're done here. Security will walk you out." No one moved. No one spoke up. A few phones rose. Someone, somewhere in the back, laughed softly, like this was entertainment. What those people did not know, what that manager did not know, what every person in that room filming on their phone did not know, was that in less than 10 minutes, every single one of them would wish they had looked away. Not because something dramatic was coming, not because of who was watching, but because in less than 10 minutes, the entire story those people believed about that woman would be corrected, publicly, permanently, and there would be nowhere to hide from what the truth looked like. But we are not there yet. First, you need to understand what it cost her to walk out of that door without breaking. Before I go any further, let me ask you something. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do, in front of people who already decided you were guilty before you opened your mouth? If you have, you won't just watch this story. You'll feel it. And if you know that kind of pain, the kind that makes you go completely still because falling apart isn't an option, hit subscribe. Not because it helps me, but because stories like this exist to remind us that silence, held with dignity, is sometimes the most powerful thing a person can carry into a room that was never designed for them. Her name was Zara Cole, 28 years old. She had worked at Vauclin for 14 months, longer than the hostess, longer than two of the line cooks, longer than the sommelier, who had never once learned her name. She was the first to arrive on shift and the last to leave. She memorized guest preferences before they sat down. She anticipated before she was asked. She moved through that dining room like someone who understood that excellence, in a place like this, was the only argument she was allowed to make. She knew the rules, not the ones written in the employee handbook, the other rules. The ones no one says out loud, but everyone enforces. If you drop the tray, you're clumsy. If you raise your voice, you're aggressive. If you defend yourself, you're difficult. So she didn't drop the tray. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't defend herself. She stood perfectly still, name badge unclipped, fingers steady, and she absorbed the blow like someone who had survived every room before this one. What she didn't know yet was that someone in that room had been watching her do exactly that, for weeks. He had been sitting at table 7 since 7:45. Corner seat. Slight angle to the room. The position a person chooses when they want to see everything without being the thing people see. He wore nothing that announced him. No visible security. No ostentatious watch. No entourage pressed against the wall. Just a man. Quiet, still, ordering nothing he didn't finish. Tipping in amounts that confused the staff because no one who looked that understated ever left that much. His name was Minjun Kwan. And the reason no one in that restaurant recognized him was because the people who knew his name were very careful never to say it in public. He watched the manager cross the floor toward Zara. He watched the manager lean in close enough to make the message humiliating, not just professional. He watched the tray tremble. He watched her go still. He watched the phones rise. And he did not move. Not yet. Because a man like Minjun Kwan does not move until the moment is exactly right. And that moment was less than 9 minutes away. While Zara unclipped her name badge with hands that only she knew were shaking, he set down his glass. While the security guard placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her toward the door, he folded his napkin. Once, precisely, while she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall, dark skin flushed, eyes bright, refusing to release a single tear in front of people who had already decided she was less. He reached into his jacket pocket and made one call. 3 words. That was all he said. 3 words, and somewhere outside, on a street that didn't know yet what was about to happen, 3 black sedans pulled away from a curb. She stepped outside into the cold air. Her phone buzzed. She answered it without looking. "I just got fired," she said, and her voice broke on the last word, despite everything she had done to prevent it. There was a pause on the line. Then a voice, calm, low, carrying the particular weight of someone who has never needed volume to be heard. "Stay where you are." The restaurant doors swung open behind her. The manager stepped out, still righteous, still certain, still performing authority for an audience that had already moved on. "You can't stand here," he said. "Move along." She turned to face him, and that was the moment. The first sedan pulled to the curb, smooth, unhurried, the way something inevitable moves when it has nowhere to be except exactly here. The second followed, then the third. The sidewalk changed. People stopped walking. Heads turned. The manager's mouth was still open, still mid-sentence, when the door of the first car opened, and the man from Table 7 stepped out. Up close, and he was different. The softness she had noticed across the dining room, gone. What stood in its place was something precise, something that did not explain itself. The men around him moved without being told, forming a shape on the sidewalk that redirected foot traffic without a word being spoken. The manager's face went completely white. "Sir," he started. The man did not look at him. His eyes were on Zara, only Zara, and in a voice that the street somehow heard despite its quietness, he said, "You're hurt." She had survived 14 months in that building. She had absorbed every small cruelty with grace. She had held her composure in a room full of people who filmed her humiliation like it was free content. But 2 words from a man she barely knew, 2 words spoken like her pain was a fact worth acknowledging, nearly undid everything she had held together. The manager tried again. "Sir," with respect, she caused a... Minjun raised one hand. The street went quiet. Not just the manager. The street. I was still holding my tray when it happened to her. Not me. Not yet. Her. Maya had worked at Vauclin longer than anyone on the floor. 7 years. 7 years of memorizing wine lists and anticipating orders and smiling at people who looked right through her like she was part of the furniture. 7 years. And it took that manager less than 90 seconds to end all of it. Right there. In front of everyone. I was at table 4 refilling water glasses when I heard him, Mr. Hargrove, floor manager, the kind of man who had just enough authority to be dangerous and just enough insecurity to enjoy using it. His voice cut across the dining room like a slap. "You, off the floor, now." Maya turned slowly. She had a tray balanced in one hand, and the kind of expression on her face that I recognized immediately. The expression of someone who has learned that reacting in public is never free. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Table 9 complained. "You spilled on the gentleman's jacket." She hadn't. I was 3 tables away and I saw the whole thing. The man at table 9 had knocked his own wine glass reaching for his phone. Maya had caught it before it hit the tablecloth. She had literally saved his jacket, but she was the one being called out. "Sir, I didn't... Are you arguing with me?" Hargrove stepped closer. Not close enough to be physical, just close enough to be a threat. "Take the apron off." The dining room went quiet in that particular way that expensive rooms go quiet, not because anyone is shocked, but because everyone has decided that whatever is happening is not their problem. Silk dresses, tailored suits, phones that lifted just slightly. Not to help, just to watch. Maya's hands moved to her apron strings, slowly, with a dignity that made my chest ache because I understood what it cost. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She untied the apron, folded it once, and set it on the service station, like it was something precious she was choosing to put down. And as security walked her toward the door, Hargrove turned back to the room and straightened his tie, like he had just solved a problem, like she had never mattered at all. I stood there with a water pitcher in my hand, and I felt something I could not name. Not just anger, something colder. The specific dread of someone who has just watched a storm hit someone else and felt the wind shift in their direction. Because here is what I knew that the guests at those tables did not. I knew that the guest at table 9, the man whose jacket Maya supposedly ruined, had arrived with Mr. Hargrove's boss, the regional director, a man named Cullen who flew in from New York twice a year to inspect the property and make Hargrove feel like a nervous intern. I knew that Hargrove had been looking for something to perform tonight, some visible act of control that would communicate to Cullen that he ran a tight operation. And I knew that Maya had been the easiest target in the room. Smart, composed, black, female, someone who had survived this place long enough to be a little too comfortable, a little too confident, a little too seen. I watched the door close behind her. I went back to refilling water glasses, but my hands were not steady anymore. Hargrove crossed the floor 20 minutes later. He stopped at the service station where I was organizing dessert menus. He didn't look at me directly. He looked at the menus. "Table 7 needs resetting," he said. "I'll take care of it," I said. He started to walk away. Then he stopped. And he turned back, not all the way. Just enough. "You know," he said, almost casual, almost friendly, "we've been getting some feedback about service consistency, certain staff members." He let that sit there. Then he walked away. I stood very still. I had been at Vauclin for 14 months. In that time, I had never once received a formal complaint. Not one. I had covered shifts that weren't mine. And I had stayed late when the kitchen was understaffed. I had memorized the dietary restrictions of 11 regular guests without being asked. Not one complaint. But I had also watched what happened to Maya tonight. And I understood, in the cold, clear way that you understand things when fear strips away every other feeling, that the feedback he mentioned had nothing to do with my work. That night, as the last guests filtered out and I wiped down the bar in silence, I thought about something my grandmother used to say. "Baby, when they show you who they are in front of somebody else, believe them, because next time, you're the somebody else." I believed her now. I believed her completely. And as I hung up my apron and walked toward the staff exit, I could feel it, the way you feel weather before it arrives. Something was coming, and I just didn't know yet that it was coming tomorrow night. Or that the man sitting alone at the corner table, the one who had been there 3 nights this week, always quiet, always watching, always tipping too well for someone dressed that simply had seen everything I just saw, and had already made a decision. I need to stop right here, because I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. If you had been standing where I was standing, if you had watched them do that to Maya, knowing it was wrong, knowing the truth, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up? Or would you have gone back to refilling water glasses, like I did? There's no judgment here. Surviving a room that was never designed to protect you sometimes means staying quiet. But if you felt something watching this, if something in you recognized this kind of wrong, then subscribe. Not for me, but because this story is not over. And what happens in the next chapter? It happens to me. Stay with me. My name badge hit the floor before I even realized I had dropped it. The dining room was full. Again. Every table, every light, every face arranged in that careful expression that expensive people wear when something uncomfortable is happening near them, not concerned. Just watching. Hargrove was standing 6 inches from my face. "There's been a complaint," he said. "A serious one." My tray was still in my hands. Table 12's appetizers. I had picked them up from the kitchen 40 seconds ago. I hadn't even reached the table yet. "From who?" I asked. That's not relevant." It is relevant if I'm being accused of something I didn't. Ms. Cole. His voice dropped. Not quieter. Heavier. The way voices get when someone has decided the conversation is already over. I need you to remove your apron. The room shifted. I felt it before I saw it. That particular silence. The same one I had watched fall over Maya 24 hours ago. The same crystal glasses. The same silk dresses. The same phones lifting. Not to help, never to help, just to document. Don't react. Don't react. Don't react. What exactly am I being accused of? I said. Quietly, carefully. Every word placed like I was walking on something that might crack. Hargrove leaned in. A guest at table 9 reported that you made a racially insensitive remark during service. The room crystallized. Everything, every sound, in every movement, every thought, compressed into one single cold point. I didn't speak to anyone at table 9 tonight, I said. I was assigned tables 4 through 7. I haven't been near table 9. Are you calling our guest a liar? And there it was. That question, the one designed to have no right answer. Say yes. You're insubordinate. Say no. You've just confessed. Stay silent. You've confirmed guilt. I had seen this trap set before. I had watched it close around Maya. Now it was closing around me. I'm not calling anyone anything, I said. I'm telling you what happened. Hargrove straightened up. He looked past me, at the room, at the tables, at Cullen sitting at the bar with a drink in his hand and his eyes on both of us. This was never about a complaint. This was a performance, and I was the prop. Security will escort you out, Hargrove said. Loud enough, deliberate enough, every syllable aimed at the room as much as at me. Collect your belongings. Your employment here is terminated. Effective immediately. The word terminated landed like something physical. My ears rang. I set the tray down, carefully. Not because I felt calm, because I refused to give him the image of me losing control. I refused to become the story he wanted to tell about why this was justified. I unclipped my badge. My fingers were shaking and I hated them for it. The walk to the door was the longest 40 feet of my life. I kept my eyes straight ahead. Not down, I would not look down. But not at the faces either, because some of them were almost curious, and I could not afford to see that right now without coming apart. And I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall near the entrance. Dark skin, flushed, eyes too bright. A woman made small in a room designed to make certain people feel that way. I looked disposable. I looked like someone the room had already forgotten. The night air outside hit me like cold water. My lungs opened. I hadn't realized I was barely breathing. I leaned against the wall. Just for a second. Just long enough to ask myself the question I could not ask inside. Is this real? My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again. I answered without looking, because whatever was on that screen could not possibly be worse than what had just happened inside. I just got fired, I said, and my voice broke on the last word. Just slightly. Just enough. After everything I had held together in that room, 4 words outside of it undid me. There was a pause, then a voice. Male, calm, low. The specific calm of someone who is never surprised by anything. I know, he said. Stay where you are. Who is this? 5 minutes. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. The restaurant door swung open behind me. Hargrove again. Still righteous. Still performing. You can't stand here. Move along. I turned to face him. And that was the exact moment. The first sedan pulled to the curb. Black, quiet, moving with the particular unhurried confidence of something that has nowhere to be except exactly here. The second followed. Then the third. Hargrove's mouth was still open when the door of the first car opened, and the man from table 7 stepped out. He was different outside the restaurant. The quiet was still there, but it sat differently on him out here. Sharper. The men around him moved without instruction, forming a shape on the sidewalk that redirected foot traffic like water around stone. Hargrove's face drained of every color it had. "Sir," he started, "we didn't realize you were—" The man did not look at him. He looked at me. Only me. "You're hurt," he said. And those two words, quiet as they were, hit me harder than anything Hargrove had said inside, because they were true. And until that moment, in that room, no one had acknowledged it. You know what the worst part was? Not the firing, not the walk to the door. It was the fact that I had given that place 14 months of my best work, and it took one lie, from one guest, to erase all of it. Yet if you have ever given everything you had to something, a job, a relationship, a person, and watched one moment destroy all of it, you already know exactly how I felt on that sidewalk. Subscribe. Not because this channel needs numbers, but because you deserve to watch what happens next. Because in less than 5 minutes, everything in that restaurant is about to change. And the man standing in front of me, he's not here to rescue me. He's here to reveal the truth. Stay. You will not regret it. His name was Min-Jun Kwon. I didn't know that yet, standing on that sidewalk. All I knew was that he had been sitting at the corner table at Vauclan 3 nights a week for the past month. Always alone. Always ordered the same thing. Always left before the dinner rush peaked. The staff thought he was a quiet businessman, a regular with money and no personality. I thought there was something else going on. Not because he was flashy. He was the opposite of flashy. But because of the way he watched a room. Not bored. Not curious. Calculating. The way someone looks at a space they already understand and are simply confirming what they already know. Once, weeks ago, I had refilled his water without being asked. He looked up. "You noticed before I reached for the glass," he said. "It's my job to notice," I told him. "No," he said. "It's your job to respond when asked. Noticing before the ask, that's something else." I didn't know what to say to that, so I smiled and walked away. He left $400 on a $120 bill. I thought he was just a generous eccentric. I was wrong. On the sidewalk, with Hargrove still behind me, still performing, Min-Jun looked at the man and said 3 words. "Bring them inside." Not loudly, not with threat in his voice, just stated, like the outcome was not a question. His men moved, not aggressively, just with a certainty that made resistance feel beside the point. Within 4 minutes, and I watched this happen in real time, still barely understanding it, the restaurant owner, the floor staff, the kitchen manager, and approximately 30 guests were arranged inside the dining room while a screen behind the bar flickered to life. Security footage. The real kind. Not the single-angle camera above the register. Multiple angles. Clear audio. Footage of the hostess seating a walk-in guest at a reserved table. A footage of the guest at table 9, the same man who had complained about Maya the night before, waving his hand at someone off-camera. Footage of Hargrove nodding along, eager, and then audio. The guest's voice, sharp, bored, entirely unconcerned with being overheard. "Just blame the waitress. No one's going to care." The dining room went absolutely still. Hargrove staggered back like the floor had moved. Min-Jun turned to the room and he spoke without raising his voice. "This establishment will issue a public apology. The manager is terminated, effective immediately. Every staff member present receives a raise." The owner, a pale, stunned man named Richter, who I had never once seen on the floor, sank into a chair. Min-Jun looked at me. "They made you invisible," he said. "Now they will see. And then, you were fired. Do you want your job back?" The room leaned in. I thought about the 14 months, the covered shifts, the unreturned nods, the way I had performed excellence in a space that had already decided what I was worth. "No," I said. Something crossed his face. Not surprise. More like recognition, like I had confirmed something he already believed. He extended his hand. "Come work for me." "I don't know anything about whatever this is," I said honestly. "You know how to read a room before it reads you," he said. "You know how to endure spaces designed to break you. I can teach you everything else." I looked around, at the stunned faces, at Hargrove, who could no longer meet my eyes, at the guest who had lied, now sitting with 2 security guards positioned on either side of her chair, as looking very much like someone who had just discovered that cruelty has a return address. I took his hand, and as we walked to the door, my phone lit up. Unknown number. One message. "You just made a very dangerous mistake." When I finally stopped shrinking, they called it reckless. But tell me, where were they when I was breaking? If you have ever had to choose your own peace over staying safe inside someone else's story, this channel is your space. Subscribe. Not for me. For every quiet soul who decided their own name was worth protecting. Because that text message, it wasn't from a stranger, and finding out who sent it will change everything you think you know about this story. Quan Group Holdings occupied the top 4 floors of a building that did not have its name on the outside. And I noticed that immediately. Every major company I had ever seen had its name on something. A lobby plaque, a letterhead, a sign above the elevator bank. Quan Group had none of that. Just a floor number and a key card that Min Jun's assistant handed me in a sealed envelope the morning after the restaurant. The assistant's name was Director Park. She was Korean, precise, and looked at me the way a surgeon looks at an unfamiliar instrument, not dismissively, but with the focused skepticism of someone who needs to determine a thing's function before trusting it near anything important. "Your access level is provisional," she told me. "You will have read permissions on floors 31 and 32. Floor 33 requires escort. Floor 34 requires Mr. Kwan's direct authorization." "What's on floor 34?" I asked. She looked at me for exactly 1 second. "Mr. Kwan," she said, and walked away. The role Min Jun had described as mine was Director of Corporate Integrity, a title that sounded important and came with no direct reports, no physical office, and an access badge that got me into exactly the rooms someone wanted me to be in and nowhere else. On my second day, I asked Director Park about my predecessor. Her expression did not change. That was the tell. When something genuinely surprises Director Park, I would later learn, nothing on her face moves. Not a flicker, not a breath. Because she has trained herself not to give information through reaction. "The previous director left the company," she said. "When?" 14 months ago. "Why?" "Personnel records are confidential." "Was there an investigation?" She stopped walking. She turned and looked at me with an expression I could not fully read, something between warning and assessment. "Ms. Cole," she said, "you are 11 days removed from being a waitress. I would encourage some patience before you begin treating this organization like a puzzle to solve." She walked away again. I stood in the corridor and thought, 14 months. The same amount of time I spent at Vauclin. I didn't think that was a coincidence. Min Jun called me to his office on day 4, not floor 34, a working office on 32. Glass walls, clean desk. The kind of room that communicates that its occupant has nothing to hide while somehow still feeling completely impenetrable. He slid a folder across the desk. "These are the vendor contracts for the last 3 fiscal years," he said. "Oh, tell me what you see." I opened the folder, studied it. It took me 20 minutes. He didn't rush me. He answered 2 phone calls in that time, in Korean, and I did not look up from the documents. 3 vendors appear in every major contract cycle, I said finally, but their addresses are all in the same zip code, and 2 of them share a registered agent. He said nothing. "That's not normal," I said. "Either someone has a preferred vendor relationship that isn't being disclosed, or these companies don't actually operate independently." He looked at me for a long moment. "The previous director flagged the same pattern," he said quietly. My pulse moved. What happened after she flagged it? I asked. He closed the folder. She left the company, he said. His voice was even, informative. Careful in the way that voices get when the speaker is choosing exactly how much to give. He stood, meeting over. Be careful who you tell about what you've seen in that folder, he said. Not everyone in this building wants this company clean. He walked to the window, and I sat there in that glass-walled room, 14 months of survival instinct firing at full volume, thinking, I am in the middle of something that started long before I arrived, and someone in this building already knows I can see it. His name was Han Seok, and the first time I met him, I almost liked him. That's the part I keep coming back to, how easy it was to almost like him. Because he was the kind of man who had mastered the art of making you feel like the most interesting person in the room. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He remembered details. He had the precise social fluency of someone who had spent years learning exactly how to put people at ease. I met him on my 6th day at Quan Group, at a small internal dinner that Director Park described as a quarterly alignment meeting, in a tone that suggested I should not ask what was being aligned. Han Seok arrived late, not very late, just late enough to be noticed, and he greeted me with a warmth that felt entirely genuine. So you're the one, he said. The one what? I asked. He smiled. The one June finally trusted with the mess. June, not Mr. Kwan, not even Min June. June. We grew up together, he said, reading my expression. His family, my family. Practically the same house for 12 years. And I know him better than anyone alive. He said it pleasantly, but something in the particular weight of better than anyone alive registered somewhere in the back of my mind as information I should store. He speaks highly of your instincts, Han Seok continued. Says you see things other people miss. I try, I said. He nodded, smiled again, moved away to speak to someone else. I watched him work the room for the next 40 minutes, and working was exactly the right word. He moved through every conversation with purpose, leaving each person a little more comfortable than before he arrived. Director Park appeared at my shoulder like a quiet warning. He runs the acquisition division, she said, not looking at me. He seems close with Min Jun, I said. He was, she said, and moved away. The text arrived on my personal phone, not my company phone, 3 days later. You've been looking at the vendor contracts. Stop. I sat with it for a long time. No signature. Unknown number. But I had received exactly one unknown number text since joining Quan Group, the night outside the restaurant. You just made a very dangerous mistake. Same number. I pulled the vendor analysis I had started and cross-referenced the shell company addresses with Quan Group's internal directory. It took 2 hours. The registered agent for 2 of the 3 suspicious vendors, the name that appeared on both sets of incorporation documents, was a law firm based in Chicago. A firm I would never have connected to anything inside this building. Except that Han Seok's calendar, which I could partially see through the shared internal scheduling system, and showed a standing monthly call with that firm. Going back 4 years. 1 year before Min Jun restructured the company from the ground up. I needed to be certain before I said anything to anyone. I understood that clearly. In a building where the last person who found this pattern quietly disappeared, walking into Min Jun's office with a theory was not a move I was willing to make before I had something solid. So I kept pulling threads. What I found over the next 72 hours, working late, working carefully, working in the particular silence of someone who has learned to think inside hostile rooms, was a pattern so deliberate it had to have taken years to build. Vendor contracts awarded on rotating cycles to prevent pattern recognition. Payments split across fiscal quarters to stay below internal audit thresholds. A web of shell companies that all traced back, eventually, to a holding entity registered in a country with limited disclosure requirements. And at the center of all of it, not Min Jun's signature, not his authorization codes, Han Seok's. On the morning of day 11, I arrived at my workspace to find my access badge had been downgraded overnight. Floor 31 only. No explanation, no notification, just a keycard that no longer opened the doors I needed. I went to Director Park. She looked at my badge without expression. "I'll look into it," she said. "Who can authorize an access change without notice?" I asked. She was quiet for 1 second longer than she needed to be. "Division heads," she said. "Han Seok is a division head," I said. She looked at me directly for the first time all morning, and in her eyes, just briefly, just for the length of one breath, I saw something I had not expected. Not surprise, recognition, like she had watched this exact sequence of events before, like she knew every step of what came next, like she had been waiting for a very long time for someone else to reach this point and still be standing. "Be careful, Ms. Cole," she said quietly. Not a warning this time. Something closer to, almost, an alliance. She walked away. And I stood in that corridor and understood something that changed every calculation I had made since walking through those doors. I wasn't the first person Han Seok had tried to remove. He had done this before. And whoever he did it to last was still somewhere in this building, watching, waiting for exactly this moment. They called her gone. 14 months ago, as they called her gone, and she never left. If you have ever been pushed out of a room, demoted, dismissed, made to feel like you no longer had a place, and quietly rebuilt anyway, this next chapter is going to hit different. Subscribe right now, because Director Park is about to show me something that will bring Han Seok's entire empire down. And the truth she's been holding, he never saw it coming. There are things about a person you don't find out from watching them work. You find them out by accident, by a door left slightly open, by a name that surfaces in a document it was never supposed to be in. I found out about Min Jun's past on a Thursday afternoon, in a conference room I wasn't supposed to be using, reading a file I had technically been cleared to access, but that nobody expected me to actually open. The file was labeled Internal Risk Assessment, Historical. It had been created 11 years ago and last accessed 14 months ago, the same week the previous ethics director had been removed. I opened it. What I found inside was not what Quan Group Holdings presented to the world. Before the glass towers and the clean board meetings and the vendor contracts, before any of this, Min Jun Quan had operated inside one of Seoul's most powerful private enforcement networks. Not a criminal organization in the public sense. Nothing so simple or so visible. More like a system of consequences. A structure that existed to resolve disputes that couldn't be taken to courts, because the people involved had too much to lose from public exposure. He wasn't a killer. The file was clear about that. He was something more specific and in some ways more dangerous. A man who understood leverage, who could walk into a room and identify every pressure point before he sat down, who made problems disappear not through violence but through the precise application of information. He had left that world deliberately. 7 years ago, he had restructured everything, gone fully legitimate, and spent the years since building Quan Group into something that could withstand scrutiny. But the file also made clear that leaving a world like that is not the same as that world releasing you. There were people who considered Min Jun's departure a betrayal. People who had been waiting for an opportunity to destabilize everything he had built. People who would use any available tool, including a corporate ethics director with a provisional access badge, to get what they wanted. I sat back from the screen. I thought about the vendor contracts, about Han Seok's name on the incorporation documents, about the shell companies funneling money somewhere. And I thought about something that had not fully occurred to me until right now, that Han Seok had grown up inside the same world Min Jun had left. Same families, same network, same understanding of how leverage worked. What if the corruption inside Quan Group wasn't just greed? What if it was a message? Come back, or watch what we do to everything you built. I went to Min Jun that evening, Not with the full file. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. But with a question. Before Quan Group, I said, "What did you do?" He was at his window. The city below was lit up the way cities look at dusk, everything soft and enormous and indifferent. He didn't turn around. "What have you read?" he asked. Enough to understand why someone might want to destroy this company from inside instead of attacking it directly. He was quiet for a long time. Then he turned. And the way he looked at me in that moment, not with shame, but with the specific exhaustion of a person who has spent years waiting for a conversation they knew was coming, told me more than the file had. "I made choices," he said, "that I cannot undo. What I can do is build something that costs more than it's worth to destroy." "Is that why you hired me?" I asked. "Because I have no connection to any of it? Because I'm the one person in this building no one thought to prepare for?" He didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. "You should have told me," I said. "If I had told you," he said quietly, "you wouldn't have come." I couldn't argue with that, and I left his office and walked to the elevator and stood there, while the doors closed, and thought about the grandmother who raised me, who used to say, "Baby, the truth doesn't need to be pretty. It just needs to be real." Min Jun's truth was not pretty, but it was real, and I had walked too far into this building to pretend I hadn't seen it. My phone buzzed. A news alert. A gossip site. A photograph. Me and Min Jun outside the restaurant the night I was fired. Blurry, but identifiable. The headline: Quan CEO's new hire, business decision, or something more. My stomach dropped. Someone had fed this to the press. Someone who wanted me visible, exposed, easier to discredit. I already knew who. By the next morning, my face was everywhere. Not just the gossip sites, entertainment news, business columns, and a social media thread with 40,000 comments and climbing, half of them sympathetic, half of them vicious, and all of them treating my life like content they had a right to consume. The comments were creative in their cruelty. Gold digger. That one appeared more than any other. Planted. Distraction. Liability. Who does she think she is? Someone had found my LinkedIn profile from 3 years ago. A waitress at a mid-range bistro in Chicago before I moved here. Someone had found my college graduation photo. Someone had found a customer complaint from a restaurant I worked at 6 years ago, a complaint so minor I had genuinely forgotten it, and presented it as a pattern of behavioral issues. They were building a character, not me. A version of me designed to make everything that happened at Vauclin look like the natural consequence of who I was. And it was working. I could feel it working in the way people at Quan Group looked at me that morning. Not hostile, not warm, just measuring, recalculating. I walked into the building anyway. I dressed carefully, not defiantly. I wasn't trying to perform confidence I didn't feel, but deliberately, because I had learned a long time ago that how you enter a room on a bad day matters more than how you enter it on a good one. Director Park met me at the elevator bank. "There are requests from 4 media outlets for a comment," she said. "No comment," I said. "Mr. Kwan's communications team is preparing a statement." "What kind of statement?" I asked. She looked at me in that way she had, the way that meant she was deciding how much to give. "The kind that ends careers," she said. "Theirs, not yours." Min Jun called a press conference at noon. No warning, no leaked preview. He simply scheduled it, and the fact that Min Jun Quan was doing anything publicly drew enough cameras to fill the building's main conference floor. I stood to the side. He had not asked me to stand beside him, and I had not offered. This was not my stage. He stepped to the podium, and the room went quiet in that way rooms do around him, not because he demands it, but because something in his presence makes noise feel unnecessary. "Quan Group is announcing the establishment of its Corporate Integrity Division," he said. "Effective today. That division will have full investigative authority across all departments, subsidiaries, and vendor relationships. It will operate independently of executive oversight, with direct reporting to the board. A hand went up from the press pool. Can you tell us who will lead this division? Yes, he said. He looked toward me. Not a gesture, not a wave, just looked. Zara Cole, Director of Corporate Integrity. The cameras turned. All of them, every single one. I stood there in the full weight of that attention, and I did not flinch. I did not smile for the cameras, or perform humility, or look to Minjun for cues on how to hold myself. I just stood there, present, upright, wearing my own name without apology. The press conference clip reached 2 million views in 6 hours. The comments were still divided. Some people called it a publicity stunt. Some called it revolutionary. Some called it a relationship masquerading as a business decision. I read all of it, not to hurt myself, but because knowing what a room thinks about you is information, and information is the only currency I had learned to trust in this building. Han Seok did not attend the press conference. He sent a message through the internal system. Congratulations on the appointment. Looking forward to collaborating. I read it 3 times. He was not surprised. He was not rattled. He had already moved to whatever was next. That evening, alone in my new office, an actual office now, floor 33, east corner, glass walls, I pulled out the vendor file and the shell company records and the text messages from the unknown number, and I laid them all out on the desk. And I started building the case. Not to take to Minjun yet. First to Director Park. Because something in the way she had looked at me in that corridor, "Be careful, Ms. Cole," told me she had been building something too. And maybe what she had and what I had were 2 halves of the same evidence. My phone buzzed. Director Park. Come to my office. Tonight. Bring what you found. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I gathered the files. And I went. Director Park's office was on floor 31. I had walked past it every day for nearly 2 weeks without being invited inside. Now, at 9:47 in the evening, with the rest of the floor emptied out, she held the door open and waited for me to enter without speaking. The office was immaculate. No photographs, no personal objects visible. A desk that communicated nothing about the person who sat behind it, which I was beginning to understand was itself a communication. She poured 2 cups of tea. Set one in front of me. Sat down. And then she did something I had not seen Director Park do once in 2 weeks. She let her face change. Not dramatically. Not a collapse. Just a small, careful lowering of the control she maintained so consistently that I had begun to think it was structural, part of her architecture. I was the ethics director, she said. Before you. I set my tea down. 14 months ago, I said. Yes. You didn't leave. No, she looked at me steadily. I was moved, reclassified as chief of staff, given enough authority to seem significant and enough restriction to be contained. Han Seok presented it to Minjun as a structural efficiency decision. Yet he was persuasive enough that Minjun accepted it. Minjun doesn't know? I asked. Minjun knows I was moved. He doesn't know why. The explanation he received was incomplete. I thought about Minjun at his window. I made choices I cannot undo. The particular exhaustion of someone carrying weight they had accepted as permanent. He didn't know one of his most trusted people had been quietly removed from the position where she could protect him. What did you find? I asked. Before they moved you. She opened her desk drawer, placed a folder on the surface between us. I opened it. It was everything I had found, and more. 3 years deeper. Shell company structures traced to their source. Vendor payments cross-referenced with external transactions. A financial map so complete it functioned like a confession. And at the center, Han Seok. Not just connected, directing. Building this architecture deliberately, over 4 years, with the patience of someone who was not in a hurry because they were certain they had already won. He's not stealing from the company, I said slowly, reading the documents. No, she said. He's using the company as a conduit. Yes. I sat back. The scale of it settled over me. For who? She was quiet for one measured breath. The same network Min-jun walked away from 7 years ago, she said. Han Seok never left. He went deeper. And when Min-jun built Kwon Group, Han Seok positioned himself inside it. Not to steal from his cousin, to give that network a legitimate financial infrastructure they could use without exposure. The room was very quiet. Min-jun's entire company, I said, has been used as a clean front for people Min-jun spent 7 years trying to distance himself from. Yes. And if this surfaces, it surfaces as Min-jun's responsibility, she said. His company, his signature on the incorporating documents, his cousin, his blind spot. I understood it now completely. Han Seok wasn't trying to destroy Kwon Group. He was trying to own it, discredit Min-jun enough to force him out, step into the leadership vacuum, and hand the entire structure, legitimate and otherwise, back to the network that had been financing it from the outside for years. My removal, before I could finish the investigation, wasn't just about protecting the corruption. It was part of the sequence. He did the same thing to you, I said. Manufactured a reason to move you before you could present your findings to the board. Yes. What did he use? For the first time, the very first time since I had known her, something flickered across Director Park's face that looked like old pain. A relationship, she said, implied, with Min-jun, enough to create the appearance of compromised judgment. I felt something cold and familiar move through me. The same playbook, different target. He's doing it to me now, I said. The press photo, the narrative. Yes, but he made a mistake. What mistake? She slid one final document across the desk. He used the same falsified audit structure both times, she said. Same method, same documentation pattern, same law firm as registered agent. She looked at me directly. Your findings and mine, together, they don't just prove what he did to you. They prove the pattern. Twice. Same perpetrator, same method. That is not coincidence. That is evidence of intent. I looked at the documents. Both sets, side by side. 2 women, 14 months apart. Both placed exactly where they could see the truth. Both targeted the moment they got close enough to threaten him. I thought about the grandmother who raised me. Baby, when they come for you twice, that's not bad luck. That's a pattern. And patterns can be proven. When do we take this to the board? I asked. Director Park almost smiled. Tomorrow, she said. But first, we tell Min-jun. 2 women, different years, same trap. If you have ever been set up to fail by someone who smiled at you every single day, you already know what this feels like. Subscribe right now, because tomorrow they walk into that boardroom, and Han Seok, he has no idea what's waiting for him on the other side of that door. Stay with me. This is where everything pays off. Min-jun did not speak for a long time after we showed him. Director Park and I sat across from him in his office, floor 34, the room that required his direct authorization, and we laid every document on his desk in sequence. The vendor contracts, the shell companies, the law firm, the falsified audits, the external transaction records, Director Park's original findings, mine. 14 months of evidence on top of 2 years of evidence on top of 4 years of architecture built by a man who had eaten dinner at this family's table since childhood. Min-jun looked at each document once. He did not look twice. He did not ask us to clarify. He absorbed it with the focused stillness of someone whose mind moves faster than it appears. When he reached the last page, he set it down. And the silence in that room was the particular silence of something that cannot be taken back. How long have you known? He asked Director Park. 14 months, she said. I was removed before I could bring it forward. He looked at me. And you, he said. 11 days. I had a head start, I said. She built the foundation. I just found the door. He stood, walked to the window. Stood there with his back to us for long enough that I counted my own heartbeats. Then he turned. Board meeting, tomorrow, 7 a.m. Everyone, no exceptions. Han-seok arrived at the boardroom at 7:04. He was composed, well-dressed. He greeted 2 board members by name in the corridor, shook hands, laughed at something, easy, practiced, warm in the specific way of someone who has spent decades making rooms feel comfortable. He walked through the boardroom door. He saw me at the head of the table. His face did not fall. I want to be precise about this, because what happened was more interesting than a collapse. His face simply paused. Every rehearsed expression he had prepared for this morning suspended for exactly 1 second while his mind ran the calculation. Then he sat down, composed himself, and arranged his face back into something pleasant. "Ms. Cole," he said, "I didn't realize you were presenting today." "I am," I said. I opened the folder, and I began. I spoke for 22 minutes. I did not editorialize. I did not perform. I presented the documents in sequence, what they showed, what they connected, what they proved when placed beside Director Park's prior findings. The board was silent throughout. 3 members had legal pads. 2 had stopped writing and were simply watching Han-seok, because Han-seok was the only person in that room whose composure was visibly costing him something, not breaking. He was too controlled for that. But the effort of maintaining it was becoming apparent in the set of his jaw, in the way he had stopped looking at the projection screen and was looking at the table instead. When I finished, Min-jun spoke. Han-seok. 1 word. His name. Nothing else. Han-seok looked up. "Do you have anything to add to what you've just heard?" The room leaned in. Han-seok looked at Min-jun for a long moment, and in that moment, in the space between one breath and the next, something passed between them that I was not part of. 12 years of shared history, a childhood, a family, something that no boardroom document could fully translate. "Jun," he started. "Mr. Kwon," Min-jun said quietly. "In this room." Han-seok closed his mouth. The board chair spoke. "Mr. Han, given the evidence presented, the board is placing you on immediate administrative suspension pending full external audit. Security will accompany you from the building." 2 men appeared at the boardroom door. Not aggressively, just there, the way inevitability looks when it has finally arrived. Han-seok stood. He straightened his jacket, an automatic gesture, dignified and entirely beside the point. He walked toward the door, and just before he reached it, he stopped. Not to look at Min-jun. He looked at me. "You have no idea," he said quietly, "what you've just stepped into the middle of." "I think I do," I said. He held my gaze for 1 more second. Then security walked him out. The boardroom was absolutely still. Then the board chair said something in Korean to Min-jun. Min-jun answered. 2 more board members spoke. Director Park leaned slightly toward me. "He said you conducted the most thorough internal investigation this board has seen in 15 years, she murmured. I sat with that. 14 months at Vauclin. 14 months being the person nobody saw. 11 days at Quan Group. 11 days to end 4 years of deliberate corruption. I thought about the dining room, the phones rising, the guests who watched Maya walk out and then turned back to their food. The manager who had said, "You people always have excuses," and believed himself entirely justified. I thought about all the rooms that had decided what I was before I opened my mouth. And I thought, let them see me now. 3 months passed. I know that sounds like a skip, like I'm rushing past the part where things got better. But the truth is that in those 3 months, better wasn't really the word for what happened. Clearer is the word. Things got clearer. The external audit confirmed everything Director Park and I had presented to the board. Every shell company, every falsified record. Every payment routed through Quan Group's infrastructure back to the network Min-jun had left 7 years ago. Han Seok's suspension became a termination. His termination became a referral to 3 separate regulatory bodies. His referral became a quiet legal process that moved slowly and deliberately, the way serious processes do when the evidence is thorough enough that no one needs to rush. Mrs. Choi, the guest from Vauclin who had told the manager to blame me, filed a lawsuit against Kwon Group. She named me specifically. She alleged defamation and professional harm. Her legal team withdrew the case 11 days after filing, citing a reconsideration of available evidence. I never found out what that evidence was. Min-jun never told me. But I had learned by then that some information is given freely, and some information is simply demonstrated, quietly, without announcement, in the way that certain consequences arrive for certain people. Hargrove, the manager who had fired Maya and then fired me, lost his position at Vauclin when the restaurant group conducted an internal review prompted by the viral footage. He filed for wrongful termination. That case was still pending. Maya, the woman I had watched walk out of that dining room on the night that started everything. I found her through a mutual contact. She was working at a smaller restaurant across town. Better management, less money. She said she was sleeping better than she had in years. I referred her for a position in Kwon Group's hospitality consulting division. She started 3 weeks later. The corporate integrity division became, in those 3 months, something that people inside Kwon Group treated with a respect that was 1 part admiration and 2 parts careful self-awareness. We had opened 4 additional internal investigations. 2 had already resulted in quiet separations. 1 had uncovered a vendor relationship so tangled it required outside legal counsel to address properly. Director Park was reinstated to her original title. She declined it. "I'm more useful where I am," she said. I believed her. We worked well together, not warmly, not in the way of people who have become friends, but in the way of people who have each decided the other is worth trusting, which is rarer and in most ways more valuable. Min-jun found me in my office late one evening, 11 days before the quarter ended, 2 weeks before the board's scheduled review of the division's work. He stood in the doorway for a moment before I looked up. I knew he was there. You develop a particular awareness of a person when you've spent months inside the same high-stakes environment, but I finished the sentence I was writing before I acknowledged him. He noticed that. Something about it made him almost smile. He came in, sat down across from me. "Are you staying?" he asked. It was the same question he had asked outside Vauclin the night everything changed, but it landed differently now, because now it wasn't an offer. It was a genuine question from a person who had learned that I was not guaranteed, that I had a will of my own that no title or crisis or shared history could substitute for. I studied him. "Are you still the person I agreed to work for?" I asked. "Or have you become someone I should be investigating?" He was quiet. "Both, probably," he said finally. "Good," I said. "I need to know the difference." He looked at me for a long moment, and in that look was something I had no clean name for. Not romance, not gratitude, not the particular transactional warmth of 2 people who needed each other in a crisis. Something more like recognition. The way 2 people look at each other when they have each seen the other under pressure, and neither of them ran. He stood. "The board review is in 2 weeks," he said. They'll want a full presentation." "I know," I said. "I'm already building it." He nodded once and left. I turned back to my desk. The city outside my floor 33 window was doing what it always does, enormous and indifferent, full of stories happening in parallel, most of them invisible to each other. Somewhere out there, a woman was holding a tray in a room that had already decided what she was worth. Somewhere a manager was leaning in close enough to make a point. Somewhere, a dining room was lifting its phones. I thought about the woman I had been 3 months ago on that sidewalk. Fired, shaking, voice cracked on 4 words she hadn't meant to let out. I thought about what my grandmother used to say. "Baby, every hard season has a lesson sewn into it. Your job isn't to skip the hard part. Your job is to find what it made you. I knew what it had made me. Not harder, not bitter, not defined by the people who had tried to make me small. Clearer. About what I would accept. About what I would not. About the rooms worth walking into and the ones that had never deserved me. I saved my document, closed my laptop, and as I reached for my coat, my phone lit up on the desk. A news alert. Han Seok, released on a legal technicality by a judge whose connection to the network's law firm had not yet been fully established, had given his first public interview since his removal. He was smiling in the photograph. He said he looked forward to clearing his name. He said he had unfinished business. He was looking directly at the camera. And something in the angle of that photograph, something in the specific quality of that smile, told me that what Director Park and I had stopped was not an ending. It was a pause. He was coming back. And this time, he wouldn't come alone. She walked out of that restaurant as someone they had already discarded. She walked out of that boardroom as someone they could no longer afford to ignore. But here is what nobody tells you about taking your power back. It doesn't end the war. It just changes who has the high ground. If this story made you feel something, subscribe right now. Not for numbers, not for an algorithm, but because somewhere, someone is watching this in the dark, on a phone, in a life that feels too small for everything they are, and they need to know that clarity is coming. That patience is not weakness. That endurance is not the end of the story. And Han Seok, he just made the same mistake everyone makes. He underestimated her. Again.